Hello and welcome to this edition of Blades of Thunder. Okay, so I have glued the blocks together and fitted them to the base plate. If you remember, this is a Pro, so the skids are normally secured by 2 bolts front and centre and rear on the thing, unlike the older versions which have the 4 screws that hold the skids on. So I've had to go through my spares box and find some M2 self-tapping screws and washers to secure these on. So if you've got a Pro, you'll need 4 self-tapping M2 screws to screw this to the base plate with. Okay, so now we got the height and we've got it all glued together, we can pop it back into the mechanic, back into the fuselage, and it should just slide nicely in. Just hold the, I think once you've got the front servos in, and it'll just find its natural place. And what you need to do is, once you've got its natural spot, is just mark on here with a pencil, make sure it doesn't move. With a pencil, just mark where the front is, and coming in at the back where the back is going to sit. You do that through the doors. Okay, also mark the front of the back block. Okay, and we'll just pop it out again. And you can put the mechanics to one side for now. So we'll just pop them on the end there, out the way. Now, for the next stage, you're going to need something to measure with. Now, I find it easier to use an engineering square because you can slide it up and down. Okay, so you mark the line in with your pencil, and then you find your mark by bringing the ruler back where the front plate of the mechanics sat, which is there. Tighten it back up, pop it across, and then draw a line across. Okay, and that marks the front position, and you can do that, you do this on both sides. Okay, now for ease, earlier on, this is the rear mounting bracket for the thing. So what I've done is I've glued the 2 parts together so that they don't fall apart when we're trying to fit it, because it's quite fiddly and it would be a nightmare. So what we do is we fit this in, get it into position. It's quite fiddly from this side, from behind. So we just push it, hold it in position along where our marks are, along the front. Give yourself a couple of mil leeway, because the front screws will hold it in place, and then mark a line to where it's going to sit. And if you take a 2mm drill, pop it through the hole and just give it a couple of twists to mark the position, and you do that at the rear as well. Okay. And you do that at the rear as well. and you can take the block out. Take your pin vise with a small, this one's got a 1mm drill in, and then you can pilot drill through to help the self-tapping screws to go in when we screw the block in. So now that's ready for the block to be screwed in. Okay, we're going to screw the block in now, but be very careful not to over tighten it, because we're going to take it out again once the mechanics are all nice and set up. And the reason for that is we're going to put some epoxy on the bottom just to help hold it in place once it, and then screw it back in. Okay, so we're going to take 4 of the flange screw M2 screws to fit the rear brackets into place. Okay, so just open that up with the craft knife. In. Okay, it's very tight inside that fuselage, so we've got a little tiny screwdriver here that we can make shorter and longer, but even at its shortest it just doesn't go in. So we've pilot drilled, so we're just going to pop the screws through because it'll help us find the position. Don't forget we're going to glue these in as well, so you want to have a little bit of movement on them to start with. And you do exactly the same on the other side. Okay, now we've got both sides and the rear brackets in, we can slide the mechanics in. So just carefully push them in. Remember, you just need to, as you get towards the servos, you just need to part the top of the fuselage slightly to help it get past. And once it's into that position, get in and then just help through the rear doors. You can just slide the mechanics into place like that, and that's the mechanics in position. Just check your tail, make sure it's in the center, and look at your front marks, make sure you're still in the center and you're happy. And we can now screw the 2 front screws in. Right, so mark your holes, use your pencil to mark the centre of your holes. And just pull your mechanics back out slightly, you don't need to remove them completely, and drill. And then take your pin vise and pilot drill your hole. There we go. And you do that on both sides. Then just slide the mechanics back into place. Okay, now the next thing we're going to do is check battery clearance, because as you can see, if we put the battery right up to the top, it's not going to clear, so we need to just move it down a bit. Just strap it into place so that we can see whether or not the canopy will go on. So tuck it in. Okay, probably could do with, will it come back slightly? Yes, it probably will. So just take the canopy off, move it back slightly. Strap it back in. If you do your strap up tight enough, it should hold quite nice and tight in position. Okay. There we go. Look at that. Fits like a glove. Okay, that's on there nice and securely, so we can pop it off now. Okay, a good tip is to mark the back of your battery position. I've just got an old paint pen here. I'm just going to draw some marks on the back so that when we put it in and out we can get it in the more or less the same place every time. Okay. Right, now we know that we've got good clearance on that position, we can screw it in, and we're going to use stainless steel self-tapping screws because we're going to be taking this in and out, and we're going to be doing a modification to this in a later episode when we do the customizations. So just pop it in, screw it in. Remember, don't do it up too tight because they're self-tapping and you'll just strip it threads. So just finger tight is more than enough to hold it in position. Both sides. Okay, so the mechanics are now fitted into the fuselage. They can't go anywhere. Nice and secure. And the last part that we're going to do before we hand it over to Kevin is just fit the rubber bit in the back like so, and just put it flush with the back of the tail boom. There we go. Okay, so we've got the mechanics fitted, we've fitted the rear mounting brackets and we've screwed it in at the front. We've checked battery clearance and made a position mark so we know where the battery is going to sit next time, which will help us when we come to balancing the model, because as you, I don't know whether we're going to do it now, but you'll probably see it will want to sit on its tail a little bit, and it's only going to get even more tail heavy as we start fitting the rear mechanics on. In the next part, Kevin's going to fit the tail rotor gearbox and the vertical and horizontal stabilizers, and he's also going to power it up and check that we've got clearances and everything spins, and also a bench vibration test to make sure everything's okay and it's not going to shake itself to bits when we put the blades on and start it up. So over to Kevin.
Okay, right. Glen has put the mechanics into the fuselage, and it's now my turn to reassemble the helicopter. We've got to put the tail on, then run the mechanics up, make sure that we've got no binding and everything's working as it should do, and also looking for vibration. And right, let's crack on. Right, we are now got to the point where we've got to fit the tail, and as you see, I've laid out the parts that I took off originally, and we got to fit the tail with the stabilizer on it. The stabilizer is just dry fitted at this precise moment, but it's together for assembly purposes. Now, when excuse me, little tip, when you're putting helicopters back together, don't just sort of force it on expecting everything to be nice. Always take the canopy off of the helicopter, and that way you can hold the main frame of the aircraft, not the body. If you start pushing on the plastic, you could bend it, damage it, and you'll be very upset with yourself. Right, let's make sure this is all good and clean before we put it on. I have done that just before we started filming to make sure that everything was good, as opposed to sort of finding a problem. Now, what we'll do, you carefully, as you see, the torque tube is in and located, and the tail goes on nice and firmly. Now you don't just whack it on, nice firm pressure, just give it a little bit of a wriggle just to make sure that it's right on, and it will find its own position when to stop. Then make sure that you do have it straight and not bent over to one side, because when you put the tail on, if the tail's not nice and vertical, it will look very strange and you won't be happy with it. It can be adjusted, but it's always best to try and get it right first time as opposed to 3 or 4 later. Now while we're here, we make sure that everything is still free and moving as it should do, and we can pop on the tail control. Now you can either just squeeze with your fingers, or let's use the correct tools and get it popped on nicely. He says if you can get his fingers out of the way. No, didn't work. That's on nice and firm. Give it a little tug just to make sure that it's not going to come off. Right, as you see, now you've put something else onto the helicopter that is now tail heavy. So it may pay, if you're not going to connect the battery up and you've got Velcro on there, you just put it on the front as a counterweight. It may help, and also, hey presto, it balances the helicopter. Now we have to, as you see, I've got all the screws from when we took it apart, except we have changed the 2 main screws that hold the tail on to slightly longer ones, because they have spacers that then holds the tail on. Now, and we are dry fitting this, not putting Loctite on it yet. What we want to do is put this together, nip it up, and we're going to run it up to make sure that we haven't got any vibrations, any binding of any controls, and everything seems to be working nicely before we even think about putting blades on. And it all needs to look and work correctly before we think, right, it's now safe. And then we start to Loctite everything together. So this is, you can either try doing this with both screws at once or do them singly. I always find it's always better with anything if you do one at a time, but you don't tighten up everything. You just make sure that one screw is started, which means this is nice and loose, which means you can then put the other screw in, trying to avoid getting bits of fluff stuck in the thread. Put the other spacer in, push through gently, and make sure the screw again is starting nicely, not cross threading, and going up nice and evenly. And then as you get towards the end of the thread and you can see that it's getting tight, you don't have to be super strong, just nip it up gently and evenly. So it all holds in and it's not going to move. Now would be a good time to make sure that we have the tail as vertical as possible. I think that looks pretty good, considering that I did that by eye and it was over on my left hand side, but that all looks pretty good to me. I'm happy with that. Now, as I said, we're not going to do putting blades on or anything like that. The first thing to do now is power it up, make sure that the controls are doing what they should do, there's no binding, and everything starts to spool up nicely and there's no nasty noises. Okay, right, now comes one of the best parts of building a helicopter. It's when we power it up after we've put it all in there, so it can actually then be live, and we're making sure that everything's doing what it should do, no binding, no vibrations, and there's no sort of strange noises that would cause an issue, and mainly when it comes to a helicopter, any vibration that can cause issues. So right, let's bring in trusted radio. Make sure, as always, throttle hold is on. Never just leave it sort of, oh, it was when I left it. Always go back to it, check your controls, make sure everything is where they should be, and throttle hold is on. And right, we will power up and wait for the magic to happen. As you see, I've got a weight on the front of the helicopter as we speak, just to sort of hold it in and listen. Little jiggle, everything comes live. That all looks good, no little puffs of smoke, no strange noises apart from the servos just being live. So again, with throttle hold on, we will then start going through the inputs. We'll slowly bring up pitch up to maximum, and then we'll start going through elevator and ailerons to full extension. And then what we can do, we'll cycle the stick to a maximum all the way round, and it's always quite fun watching the head do its own little dance just because you're doing these movements. Make it a little bit smaller, make sure it all looks good. Again, that looks nice. So we then come to the tail. Is the tail doing what it should do? Going the right way? That always seems good. Never just do it once or twice and go, oh, that will do. Always do it a few times, just to emphasize. One of those things, the more checks you do, the less likely are that you will miss anything. Now, I just check the weight. We'll have the 0 pitch set, and we will obviously, and also make sure that the rudder's compensating for when you move the body, and also then make sure that the cyclic and the pitch and everything is doing what it should do when it comes to the swash plate. Is it counteracting what you're moving? Okay, that all looks good. There was no strange noises, and it's doing what it should do. Right, the next step is to actually make it live, turn the motor on. Let's spool it up. Let's check it for some vibrations, and also that the servos still all work when the rotor head and the tail are at maximum speed. Now, I'm telling you all this now because it gets noisy and you won't hear a thing I'm saying. So, what we'll do, importantly, any helicopter, more so with a scale helicopter, never switch the motor on when the stick is all the way down. You'll have full negative pitch, and that can cause problems with the vibrations and lots of things that you don't really want to know. So set it to mid stick, which is 0 degrees. The helicopter won't try and squeeze itself into the ground, and also then it won't try and take off if blades were attached. So what we'll do, again, for safety, I know it's not going to go anywhere, but I don't know what it's going to do. Let's power it on, and we'll watch and listen as best we can. It will get a little bit noisy, so you won't hear what I'm saying, but here we go.
Motor idle. Motor on.
Right, now we can hear ourselves again. As we're at maximum RPM, make sure the tail's working as it should do. Make sure the swash plate is going up and down, left, right, and the aileron is working as it should do. As you see, I had my hands on the fuselage, make sure there was no major vibrations or anything untoward happening there. And the final one, on a helicopter like this, if there's any major vibrations, it will show quite dramatically up on the tail. But as you'll see, if you watched it back, it was really good, nice and smooth, and nothing to worry about. So we know motor is shut down. I will disconnect the battery and make it safe to work on. Okay, put the weight back on. I will leave the battery on it just as a counteract, so I can now put the blades back on. We don't really need that now, so I'll put that safely out the way. Now let's put this round so we can put it together. Now, if you're not really sure which way the blades have got to go when it comes to the tail, if it's you're still learning, turn the rotor head. It gives you an idea of what direction the tail is going to be going. Then that way you know that the blade, as you see there, it's turning anti-clockwise when it's turning, so you fit the blades so the trailing edge is always at the back. Now, again, as this is all for setup, normally we would put a little bit of Loctite on the threads to make sure that everything is all good. But we just want to make sure that everything is all going together nicely. Okay, now that all looks good. No problems there. I'm going to have to move it around so I can put the main rotor blades on. Now, as I said when we took it apart, all the blades are numbered, so we know which blade goes into which blade grip. Then that way we knew when we first did the test flight there were no vibrations. It's always best to put the blades back where they came from, so you don't put them in the wrong one and could then induce vibration. So okay, and there we have it. Tail blades are attached, main rotor blades are attached. Now starting to look an absolute stunning aircraft. Everything seems to be doing what it should do, spins nicely. Now getting excited to get it out in the field and give it a test flight, which we'll be handing over to our chief aircraft tester, Paul Bassett. This is enough for me this time round. The next filming session will be up at the field, where we will go through final pre-flight checks, again double checking that everything is tight, doing what it should do. There hasn't been anything happen since we last looked at the helicopter, and we'll see you again. Thank you.
Hope you enjoyed this video. Please like, share and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.